Hey everybody, welcome to December 15th MakerDAO community call. My name is David Utrobin. I actually work at the Maker Foundation and have been a longtime community member here at MakerDAO. And I get the pleasure of hosting these calls every Tuesday. And yeah, there's a lot of people that are regulars on this call that know what it's about. But for those of you that might be stumbling across this for the first time, basically we use this call to do a couple of different things. We use it both to do weekly updates of the universe at MakerDAO. So whenever we don't have a guest, we cover the Maker Relay, which is a weekly publication that's produced by actually a number of contributors at MakerDAO. And so, yeah, typically we go through that. We try to wrap up kind of what's happening in governance, what's happening in protocol development, what's happening in the community, etc. And then secondarily, we like to have interesting guests on the call because, behind the whole idea of MakerDAO, there's actually tons and tons and tons of individuals doing really, really great work. And so today, I'm really pleased to say that we do have a great guest, Prabhaav Bhardwaj, who has been working with the Risk Domain team, and I actually think, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe he works at or works for Simple ID, and they are a smart contracts and like on-chain data and monitoring company, and so they've been working to produce a really cool DAI tracker, and so yeah, today we're gonna have him on, and we're going to talk a little bit about just what's happening on that side of MakerDAO in terms of risk monitoring tools. And so, yeah, here I'm going to send over Prabhaav a invite in just a second here. And yeah, and just as a reminder, the call is super laid back. Feel free to jump in the chat with any questions. Anything you want to hear Prabhaav talk about, yeah, don't be shy. I'm happy to relay it on your behalf. And so, yeah, with that being said, hey, Prabhaav, welcome to the call. I guess like the best first question for you that we could use to kind of break the ice and get started is tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into DeFi and crypto, and then by extension, risk monitoring tools?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, David. So I'm Prabhaav from Simple ID. We got into DeFi and crypto by the way of participating in Tachyon Consensus Accelerator. So they had a DeFi-focused accelerator earlier this year. We graduated that in March, and ever since then, we've been, trying to catch on to this rocket ship that's DeFi and help customers in this space better understand their product, help them with their engagement and retention. And yeah, that's a quick intro for us.
Very nice. Where are you based out of?
We were based out of New York, but
as
it is Christmas time, we're visiting family and friends. So right now I'm in New Orleans.
Nice, man. That's really cool. How big is the team?
It's just me and one other guy who's in Canada now, so he's on a different time zone and trying to work late at night.
Nice. Yeah. There's seasons of that late night sessions. Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Cool. So I know Simple ID in and of itself is like its own platform. It has its own services. It has its own whole story and plan. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before you talk about specifically how your team has applied it to DAI?
Sure. Do you want me to go ahead and share screen? And
yeah, be my guest. Be my guest. Absolutely.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I could see it.
Awesome. So yeah, what we're talking about today is the DAI monitoring tools that we're working with the risk team at Maker to put together. And as I mentioned just before, Simple ID is a smart contract event monitoring and engagement platform. So what we do is we watch for on-chain events for certain smart contracts, and we trigger off-chain actions by giving you a webhook to connect to. The basic Simple ID platform is it's located at app.simpleid.xyz. What you can do here today is you can basically import a smart contract that you're interested in. So we have some of the popular smart contracts here. So for example, Oasis and MakerDAO, etc. And once you do that, what you can do is you can create segments of users. So this could be as simple as a wallet balance. So you can say, give me all my users that have more than X amount of assets or less than, and then specify a webhook URL where we can send you a message. This is useful for if you want to do dynamic UX onboarding for new users versus whale users, for example. Or you can do something even more complicated where you can say, I want to listen to smart contract events. So if on the Oasis text contract, a certain event happens, notify me on this webhook URL. And this is the basic Simple ID application that does real-time blockchain event monitoring. What we've done for the DAI risk team is they wanted to, at any time, understand how DAI is being used. This could be in different automated market makers. This could be in yield farms, and also a little bit of competitive analysis of how other stable coins are being used in these different platforms. And this requires a bit of more of a custom work. So the metrics we were asked to monitor are the following. So they wanted to find out who are the top 500 wallets that hold DAI, and of those wallets, what other stable coins they hold, whether that be USDC, USDT, etc. The other aspect was secondary platforms. So again, with these top 500 DAI wallets, what type of other platforms, other secondary DAIs do they use, like Aave DAI, C DAI, Y DAI? And of course, the inflows and outflows of all these stable coins and these secondary platforms in AMMs. So how is DAI being used in different AMMs, whether that's be Uniswap or Balance or Curve? And since yield farming is so popular these days, how is DAI being utilized in these yield farms? Again, quick reminder, if you guys have any questions or feedback during this call, please go ahead and let me know. So if not, let me just continue. So what we've done is we're presenting this information in a way that's useful for the community itself. So the first metric that we're monitoring is the stablecoin breakdown. So this is a chart of the stable coins, whether it's DAI, and the top 500 wallets that have that, and which stable coins they also have. So this will give you a breakdown of the Tether, True USD, Binance USD, USDC, etc. Again, there's a different way of looking at that with pie charts, which addresses hold the most amounts of DAI. So in top 500 wallets, Curve and SushiSwap and Uniswap, of course, come in the top aspect of that. Then there's, of course, secondary platforms. So this is of my DAI holders, how many of them hold C DAI or A DAI or Y DAI. And again, another different way of looking at that versus just tables as a chart of what are the top wallets that hold these DAI tokens. The other interesting way of looking at this is in terms of AMMs. So we want to know in which AMMs hold the most DAI and what are the total inflows and outflows. This, of course, will be broken down in weekly basis, monthly basis, and quarterly basis. What we want to do moving forward is even provide like a chart of the inflows and outflows on a daily basis for a 90-day to 180-day timescale. So you can see how DAI is being moved in and out of these different AMMs at a much more granular level. Then there's inflows and outflows of yield farms. So who are the popular yield farms that are utilizing DAI? Again, you see Curve and their yield farming pools are the top yield farms that have DAI utilization. And then there's Sushi Swap and Curve, a Barn Bridge also falling on.
So I have a quick question to jump in here with.
Mhm.
So for just for the kind of general understanding, why is it important for somebody like a risk team to monitor and actively watch inflows and outflows of DAI from like these different smart contracts and yield farms? Like, what's the primary I guess insights that you can get from this? And yeah, love to hear your answer.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things to know here is just utilization metrics. I think just understanding which yield farms are utilizing DAI. And it could also be for competitive analysis. So as we add more information in terms of like C DAI and Y DAI and A DAI, understanding if these yield farms are utilizing these secondary platforms over DAI. It could also be for setting interest rates for DAI. There could be a whole slew of reasons that the risk monitoring teams can see this. And it's also good to add visibility for the community to understand how DAI is being utilized in these different platforms.
Nice, nice. Which actually, the way you answered it leads me to another question. So, is the intention with this specific tool for it to be accessible to the public? It's not like specifically like for the risk team with special access. Like this is meant to be a public resource.
Absolutely, yeah. We at the end of this presentation, I will show you where you can access this tool. One thing to note is this is still a work in progress, so we will be adding more information to this tool set, and also based on the feedback on this call, if there's any other interesting ways to look at DAI utilization or breaking down the utilization in different types of graphs, please go ahead and post that here because we will add those features as it makes sense.
Sweet.
Okay, so the other charts, as I mentioned, are inflows and outflows of DAI in general, which wallets have the most inflows. And it makes sense that Oasis and Uniswap would be the top inflows and outflows of these of DAI. And then you can also see it broken down in terms of the top wallets with over 500 million in DAI on the right-hand side. Same thing with CDAI. As you can know, there are some wallets that we don't have names for. We basically used a public data set to get this information in Etherscan. It would be nice to have names for every one of them, but sadly, we don't have the names for all these wallets. And finally, the inflows and outflows for Aave and Yearn DAI are also broken down here. Some future work that we are planning to do is breaking down more in a granular level the trading volume in AMMs for DAI, and also doing more competitive analysis on these different lending platforms. So that's Compound, Aave, Cream. So understanding more about the lending and borrowing volume, stablecoin debts, loan originations, DAI loans repaid, etc. As David just mentioned, you can access this dashboard at monitor.simpleid.xyz today. So you can go in there and play around with the tool, look at the different breakdowns of stablecoins, secondary platforms. All the charts that I just mentioned are available there, so you can look at it in terms of like inflows in 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, etc. One thing to note is, as I mentioned earlier, this information will be changing. We might be adding more data, so be on the lookout for that also. And if you guys have any questions or feedback or any other data that you would like to see on that platform, do let us know in the chat, or you can also contact us.
Sweet. Yeah, that's really cool. I would love to do like a little walkthrough of the current dashboard and kind of the current charts and data that you have there. I know you covered a lot of it in the presentation, but I would love to kind of get like a slow look at this.
Sure. One thing to note also here is this data is updated once a day. So
Okay.
you might see a little bit of discrepancy here and there, but most of this information will be up to date every day. So one thing to note is if you are interested in any of these addresses, we link out to Etherscan. So you can, of course, go there, look at that information at Etherscan also. So you'll see about 81 million DAI here. It should pretty much match to what we're seeing here. As I mentioned, this information is kept up to date once a day. You can click around here to see breakdown of the top True USD holders, the top Binance USD holders. You can play around with that. There's, of course, the top 500. So you can keep scrolling to see the other wallets that hold these stable coins here. If you scroll over on the charts for the pie charts, you'll see the breakdown of which wallets have these, the breakdown of DAI here. Same thing with these charts here. Just scroll over, you can see the information. And again, you can sort this by Aave DAI, C DAI, and Y DAI as you are interested. And of course, click out to whichever wallet you want to. And then with the top transfers of AMMs and yield farms, the way we've broken it down is total inflows and outflows, and a weekly breakdown, a monthly breakdown, every 3 months and every 6 months. As I mentioned, what we want to do is add another chart that's more granular, where it will be a breakdown every day for the past 90 days or past 80 days. And that information will be displayed in a chart as a line chart. So you can see it trending up or down based on popularity, et cetera. So that will give you a different way of looking at that information to understand usage. And again, same thing for yield farms, breakdown of these. So, one other thing to note is we are currently looking at about 11 or so popular yield farms. The way we broke this down is just based on how much money are in this yield farm. So if it's over 1 million DAI, we're tracking it. We're not tracking every single yield farm out there just because it doesn't make sense to, track everything. Just we want to know which are the popular ones and how they're using DAI. And of course, for the top transfers in and out, same thing. We're trying to restrict it to where it makes sense and not to kind of like have too much data in here. So it's just overstimulates people looking at it.
There are a couple of things in the chat from Akiva. Or sorry, one thing from Akiva, one thing from Peyton. I'll kind of read them in order. So the first one is from Peyton. I've been curious about how much DAI popular exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken are holding. Is that something that this platform tracks?
So one thing to note is they could possibly be in here. So the popular exchanges could be in here. We just don't know their wallet address to tell you if it is Kraken or Coinbase, for example. So it could be one of these wallet addresses for all we know. But this is a breakdown of top 500 wallets that have DAI. So if it's on chain, we have that information. We just can't guarantee that these wallet addresses will have the name of that exchange. So for example, this one, if you go to Etherscan, it is very well could be Coinbase. We just don't have that information. But one thing we would like to do is maybe make this a community-driven thing for wallet addresses and adding names for it. I know Dune Analytics does something similar, which is really useful. Etherscan, of course, has some tagging in there, but yeah, that's unfortunately we're not able to tell you if it's Kraken or Coinbase if those two sources of information don't have that there.
Right. That makes sense. And then Akiva asks, do you have some method for getting real-world names for EOAs with DAI? I assume EOA means Ethereum owning address, but I might be wrong. Like from exchanges or something, and he means individual users.
I see. No, we don't have that. What we do, our focus is just looking at on-chain data. But we haven't gotten to the point of connecting to exchanges and getting that type of information. Although that would be really cool to have. We're just not there yet.
Nice. I wonder, is there a way to download this data so that like a person in the public can work with it, can animate it, can visualize it in different ways?
So one thing that we are thinking about doing is something like Eat Stats, where this information is available, and we can provide like a webhook interface, for example, where a user can say, "Hey, I want to listen to this chart and see if this changes, and if anything changes, we send a webhook update to that." So that's one way we can allow like other developers or users to listen to changes and build tools on top of that. Another thing we can do is just export a CSV, if that makes more sense. But that's not going to be dynamic. That's going to need to be done every time the data changes. So
Right.
we're definitely open to suggestions there. So it can be a webhook is something that we've already done, as I mentioned in our app.simple ID. You can assign a webhook to any of these segments, and you can get the data out to you. But if a CSV makes more sense, we can, of course, export this information to a CSV.
So viewing the dashboard is one thing. What about actually using Simple ID, like creating those segments, putting in webhook URLs? Does that require any form of like account, any kind of subscription or anything like that?
So app.simple ID, right now we've kept it open. We can maybe discuss that where you can come in and start doing like some basic DAI monitoring there. But as far as like this information, we haven't integrated this into that app.simple ID, as we understood the scope of this work to be just a public domain
Right.
URL. But we can discuss that. If the community is interested in having this information in app, or having some of the app features like webhooks in this public dashboard, we can totally work on that.
Nice. So what has the reception been so far with this tool? And actually, sorry, a precursor to that question, how long have you and the other person in your team been working on this?
So we've been working on Simple ID since probably like January. This version of Simple ID.
Oh, wow, sweet.
Yeah, and this dashboard, we've been working on it for the past month.
Very cool. Yeah, this is a ton of progress for a month. Yeah, looks really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, sweet. And then yeah, so what's the reception been from the Maker Risk team, from Primosh and Marto and all those guys?
Unfortunately, Primosh has been pretty busy, but the one feedback that he had was basically more granular breakdown on this would be very helpful for them. And of course, the phase 2 that I mentioned is a work that we've got planned, where we want to give you more breakdown of how other lending platforms are using stablecoins, and of course, how they're using DAI. So what we have right now is what we're calling phase 1, where we just give you like an understanding of what how DAI is being used across the universe of DeFi. The next phase is more of a competitive analysis of other lending platforms and what they do with DAI and their versions of DAI.
That's very cool. Do you imagine that next phase to also include monitoring things like interest rates, collateralization, like positions and all that stuff?
I'm not aware of that being a requirement right now, but that would be something that we would have to look into if it's if that is something that the risk team deems necessary. But the whole idea of this started off with the risk monitoring tool posed on the forums. I do believe the rate setting and things that you mentioned has been covered by another team. If this is what you're mentioning there, but I might be wrong on that.
Yeah, I think there is another. I don't know if Vishesh's Decipher.io tracks interest rates or what happens, but I know that there's a rate setting working group that consists of at least Primosh and a few people from the risk team. But yeah,
Yeah, I
that
think
was
this is the one that you're talking about, right?
yeah. Well, hold on, let me see. Yeah, the makervaults.decipher.io. Yeah, there's also like die.decipher.io, and then there was another one. I think it was loans.decipher.io. And I think on loans.decipher.io, I think Vishesh was doing some tracking of interest rates and like individual positions. But yeah, exactly. MakerVaults.decipher.io also tracks MakerDAO's individual positions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool.
And yeah, if the risk team wants that information to monitor that information, we're more than happy to add that here. Our whole goal is to build these like dashboards that are monitoring dashboards that will add the most value to the community. And of course, if we can provide like some sort of like webhook interface for people to build on top of that, that is even cooler. So right now, for these types of dashboards, we're updating it daily. What we want to do eventually is get it to as close to, uh, close to like in line with the blockchain. But for much high level things like DAI usage, it just doesn't seem, it's not necessary to be, close to the blockchain, like 1 to 3 blocks, because it's just too noisy at that point. When
Yeah.
you want like a high level picture, you don't necessarily need that type of granularity. But maybe with like interest rates and vault monitoring, that makes more sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure that there's probably going to be situations in the future where like specific smart contracts should be like very granularly monitored, or like I'm sure there's a ton of flexibility with the needs. But yeah, I think like a few blocks out is granular enough that you get like a pretty accurate general picture of these things. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is really really cool, man. So there are actually a number of analytics and like stats dashboards already, and I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm curious. So we actually list a bunch of them here. I'm gonna post the URL in the chat on the community development portal under participation tools for governance, and I'm gonna probably be adding this this dashboard here pretty soon, and I'm curious. I guess I'm curious. One, like what I mean, you already kind of answered this throughout the call. How Simple ID differentiates itself compared to like all the other dashboards that are available. Like this really is specific to DAI as an ERC20 token and monitoring like the whole space rather than an individual protocol. Um, I guess maybe I can move forward to my other question, which is what kind of feedback specifically are you looking for from the community? Like, do you have any open-ended questions that you want to throw out there? Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just, I guess, maybe if my like maybe if my answer for how we differentiate isn't clear from earlier, the way we're looking at this is we are focused on a subset of contracts. If you look at like the landscape of other tools, like Dune Analytics is the most obvious one. There's also the Graph, Etherscan. The way we look at it is we are targeting only a subset of smart contracts, and we want a very high performance monitoring system for that. The one thing that we're looking into is with the ability to take actions, ability to send alerts if something major happens. So for example, when DAI was off its peg a couple of days ago, or if there's a exploit being done on a AMM or a yield farm, if those yield farms have signed up for simple ID monitoring, and once we are like 1 to 3 blocks behind blockchain, we can send those alerts instead of somebody constantly having to monitor that or having to refresh the dashboard to see if anything has changed. So that's the direction we're going towards. A good parallel for this would be like AWS CloudWatch or these monitoring and alerting systems. The dashboards are just a convenient way of ingesting that data for people.
That makes sense. So when the data is actually sourced and ends up like getting sent to these webhooks and updates everything, where is it being sourced from? Does Simple ID have its own like dedicated nodes? And like, yeah, just curious what that behind the scenes picture looks like.
So we're using a pub sub system that basically populates our PostgreSQL database. And based on the segments that you've set up or based on webhooks that we publicly made available, when data changes there, we will send an update saying that XYZ has changed on this segment or on this webhook that you're listening to. So that's the system that we have for subscriptions.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. And yeah, well said on how you differentiate, because yeah, I got a lot of those pieces, but then when you put it all together like that, it was like, okay, yeah, I'm seeing the bigger picture here. Yeah. So
Yeah, I
then,
mean, I think there's definitely a need for a more real-time monitoring tool, given like you just hate to see like the hacks that constantly happen because of
absolutely.
whatever reasons. But the best thing to do today, it seems like, is to get some sort of insurance. But what we want to do is allow people to be notified sooner than
Right.
just checking Twitter or Discord for updates on the protocols. Where if you are a interested party in MakerDAO or in any of these AMMs or any of these AMMs or yield farms, you should be able to subscribe to those events yourself instead of having to rely on a third party to let you know.
Absolutely, yeah. The ability to be aware moment to moment through the use of alerts is extremely useful in like a in like an alternative financial system, right? Or like a set of alternative like financial protocols. Yeah, and actually, I've been like super surprised over the last couple of years how slow the space was to actually create these kinds of like alerting tools. So I'm really glad to see that that your team is tackling it. It's really exciting. Cool. And so yeah, so my other question was what kind of feedback are you looking for from, I guess, the maker community specifically?
I think the most useful feedback would be the data that we presented. Does this make sense? Is there different ways you'd like this data presented? Is there different timescales, charts that you're interested in? And of course, if we've missed any type of like information to present, if there's like other platforms that you guys are interested in to track, letting us know, because as I mentioned earlier, it's just we want to make sure that this information is as useful to the community, and we're more than happy to change the timescales or whatever if it makes more sense. This is just our first cut of what we think is useful. We're more of like developers and engineers, and we're not that familiar with all the nuances of Maker's DAI system. So we're happy to learn and change this dashboard and monitoring as the community sees fit.
Oh no, I'm muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was like,
my bad. Yeah, I was gonna ask. So, if somebody does want to reach out to you or give feedback about the dashboard, where can they do that? What are the feedback channels? Is there a forum thread, a type form, a specific email that you'd like to be reached out at?
I can start a forum thread on Maker, on forum.makerdao. I can do that. You can also email us, so I can post that here. 1 second.
Yeah, I think a forum thread would be extremely valuable. I'll definitely post the link to this video so people on the forum who weren't around today can also get like a link to a resource, see what it's about. Yeah, have all of that there. Very nice. Hello at Simplified. So simple. All right, cool. So I would love to open it up to the chat and see if anybody has specific questions or anything that they'd want to kind of zoom in on or ask about. Feel free to jump in. And then I think in the absence of questions, also I'm going to open it up to you to just see if you want to ask or do any last open-ended statements or questions. And then I think we could spend maybe like the last 10 or 15 minutes of the call seeing what's happening in current events around MakerDAO. I see Akiva has a question here in the chat. If you had to get data on individual users holding on an exchange, how would you do it?
That's a great question.
You'd have to
We
like reach out
honestly
to the
haven't.
exchange, right?
Yeah, probably that. The other thing that we're trying to balance here is, maintaining some level of privacy. I think like if those accounts are labeled, especially if they are like, AMMs or yield farms or Coinbase cracking, great. But like, I just don't know if it makes sense to like dox individual users, especially when this is like a community tool. I just don't know
100%
if
agree.
that makes sense when it's like publicly available. It's just, unless it's like a Ethereum ENS, maybe we can add that, but I don't know if that necessarily adds value to what this monitoring tool is supposed to do. It's just to understand usage of DAI, maybe get alerts for if we add like interest rates or tracking metrics. I don't know if it adds that much value to label each wallet address, but I open to feedback there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think it's very important to preserve as much privacy as you can for individuals. I think having those bigger contract addresses, bigger holders that might be like VCs, like more public address, people who like willingly put their names out on ENS, right? Yeah, that seems fine. But to go to an exchange and like get records of people's like that, I feel like that's a little crazy.
Yeah, and maybe we can like start like the one idea that we've had is starting like a GitHub gist or whatever of, as I've said, some of these yield farms we weren't able to put a name to. So maybe if we can like add names to that to make this more community driven to identify AMMs and yield farms, because it's like a whack-a-mole, right? They're popping up so fast that maybe it should be community driven to, put names on these yield farms and AMMs. We can do that for sure.
I see Peyton asks, what do you make of many of the top wallets holding, not having much exposure to other stablecoins?
I think it's a good question for the risk team. Honestly, like we're more of, just engineers and data scientists, not necessarily, I don't know. That's maybe something for the community to break down.
Yeah, totally. And then Proposal asks, is there a way to simplify the understanding of when DAI moves up and down in price using this tool? So I guess, what can inflows and outflows and addresses tell us about what the peg is doing?
Again, great question for the risk team. If you have good ways for us to like visualize that, happy to do that. Not to like avoid these questions. I can't speak for the MakerDAO risk team. I'm not sure what they're using this information for. I'm not sure what the community is using this information for. It's up to you guys to come up with that.
Totally. And I guess to a certain extent, you could probably see like if there's an interest rate change and you see like a specific inflow, an outflow of DAI from like one protocol to another, you might be able to like gain some sort of insights from that kind of behavior. You could say, oh, hey, a ton of DAI is entering like, the USDC DAI compound curve pool, right? And not a lot of USDC is coming out. So therefore you can make like some sort of insight. But I know this is only really targeting DAI. Is there plans like outside of Simple ID's involvement with Maker to do similar tracking and monitoring for other tokens, like perhaps USDC and even things like eventually like BAL or I don't know, any anything that has
Yeah.
real demand?
We are working on some proposals for the Curve team to manage to monitor their yield farming pools. As I mentioned, we want to help the ecosystem for Curve or Balancer, these bigger systems, to help alert their users of changes, or if there's even arbitrage opportunities, like, hey, we need this type of stable coin in this pool because we're offering a higher APY, those types of things should be, it shouldn't require users to constantly go back to the website to get, it should be something that they can subscribe to events or build chatbots, build useful tools on top of that. So we've got a proposal for Curve. We're also looking at the E2 Medasha data, so helping validators and stakers there. If there's any type of slashing events happening, if there's any types of important things that validators need to be aware of. So we're looking at putting a proposal for them to help them monitor the E2 staking data.
Nice, sweet. So in the future, there would be ways to like get even more interesting kind of like DAI specific data and like charts and yeah, that's cool. It's exciting.
Yeah, maybe like down the road, if we have enough of these systems and webhooks set up, it could be, I don't know, this is just like off the top of my head, like it could be like a Zappify type of thing where people can put together like interesting ways of combining this data to, whether it be for trading or that could be for, insights or whatever charts that they want to build.
Right. Yeah, which is why I asked about the downloadability of the data, because I'm sure people love to play around with it outside of these platforms. And actually, Akiva wrote insights. So yeah. I mean, imagine having like a kind of like a formula that that is more or less accurate most of the time, and it can alert you to like a very specific thing you're looking for, right?
Yeah, and I think building more of these dashboards for other platforms will also help, like, potential investors understand real usage versus just like people coming in leaving platforms for just yield farming opportunities.
Totally.
So it's just adding more visibility, more education to the community and the DeFi space as a whole.
Totally. Yeah, accessibility to information, man. That's a really big obstacle and barrier that your team is breaking down. So kudos to both of you. Yeah,
Thank you.
All right, sweet. Yeah, final call out. Any questions? Let's go. Let's get them in. And if not, yeah, thank you again so much for coming. It's been nothing short of an absolute pleasure. Yeah, cool.
And one thing to note is I will be putting together a forum post, and then I think, David, if you want to post that to the people here, that'd be great. So if you guys have any feedback, added to that forum post.
Yeah, DM me when it's up, and I'll actually just post it in the general channel in our Rocket chat, and then I'll post as a comment the link to the recording of this call. That's what I'll do.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right, sweet. Well, we got a good 15 minutes left, and I'm gonna, while still just giving it another minute or two for any final questions or anything, I'm gonna pull up Maker Relay, kind of prime myself mentally to do like a quick shotgun update of what's happening this week. All right, cool. Well, Prabhaav, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, again, total pleasure. And yeah, it looks like there's not too many comments or anything like that. So sweet, man.
Thanks, guys.
Looking forward to the development of this tool.
Awesome.
Sweet. Take care. All right, cool. So I'm gonna share my screen here in a second. I'm gonna just readjust my windows a little bit, make it a little bit more user friendly or viewer friendly. All right, cool. And then here we go. All right, sweet. So for the last 10 or 15 minutes of the call, I'm just gonna do like a quick run through of Maker Relay. There has been some really interesting stuff happening in Maker governance, generally speaking. Yeah, so right now we're actually in like week 2 of December, and as a result of this MIP for component 2 special proposal 6, SP is special proposal, right? Yeah. So yeah, this calendar exceptions MIP was passed last month, and that means that there's no official monthly governance cycle for December. So we're operating purely on a weekly governance cycle at the moment. So there's a number of different votes happening in the weekly governance cycle right now. So these are the different governance polls that are happening. There's a USDC PSM parameters vote happening right now. There's also a rates proposal, which actually is, I think, the first real rates proposal that has a lot of different changes. And so recently, in recent months, there was a rate setting working group that Primož proposed, and they changed kind of the method that stability fees are adjusted in the community. Before, we used to have pretty much votes for every single asset, every single vault type on a week-to-week basis, but that very quickly became unrealistic and did not scale. And so the responsibility for actually suggesting rate changes naturally kind of fell to the risk team. And it didn't fall. Actually, MKR voters voted on this kind of methodology change. And so now, instead of having a dozen or so polls dedicated to stability fee adjustments, we just have one proposal and an associated forum thread that kind of lists the methodology, lists the reasoning behind the changes, and really puts it in the hands of the pros. So yeah, here's the one that we're voting on at the moment. So you could see the different changes. And a few of them were raised, like ETH A is being raised by 50 basis points, ETH B is being raised by 1%, WBTC by 50 basis points again. BAT A is almost doubling to 8%. And then a number of them are being lowered. And I believe the ones that are being lowered that is the case because of the low utilization percentage. So a lot of these vaults came out and just saw almost no usage, like KNC, ZRX, Mana. Actually, I think that's not true for Mana. You know what? Really quickly, let's go to DAI stats, or actually like Maker Burns interface a little better. I'll scratch that. Yeah. So so this one just has a really small debt ceiling. Yeah, ZRX. The utilization rates are just very low on a lot of these, and I think balancing the risk perspective with the business perspective is something that the rate setting working group does actually take into account in their method. And so I think a lot of these decreases are associated with trying to get utilization up on those vault types. Then going back, there's also another Oracle pull to whitelist Gnosis on the ETHUSD Oracle. Pretty standard stuff. And then, there's a number of community greenlight polls. For those of you that don't know, community greenlight polls are put up after a MIP6 collateral onboarding application is submitted. And so it gives MKR voters an opportunity to vote like, yes, we're greenlighting it for the different domain teams to do work on these things. No, we're not, or we're deferring it. We're just basically saying it's not really a priority. And so this month we have 3 different collaterals that are being put up to community greenlight polls. That's Rapid Zcash, Rapid Filecoin, and DeFi Pulse Index. And feel free to just jump into this Maker Relay and click around. The team did a great job of linking to the applications, linking to the votes. So all the information is right there at your fingertips for exploring. And so a brief recap of what happened last week. So that's all. Sorry. So that's all the governance polls that are happening right now. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, let's actually just really quickly check vote.MakerDAO. So there is no, it's the governing proposal. Yeah, so there are no active executive votes because this most recent one passed, actually. All right, cool. So then moving on, recap of what happened pretty much last week. DS Chief 1.2, the upgrade happened. The migration is still ongoing, but we did manage to reach the 80,000 MKR quorum, the minimum quorum required for actually passing that first proposal to activate it. So this vote right here, it needed 80,000, and we got it. And so yeah, we upgraded the chief to being the chief 1.2. And essentially the main thing that this upgrade achieves is the ability for, or rather the disability of flash loans in Maker governance. So we had an incident a few months ago where basically a team was able to push through a vote by, at the very end of the vote, employing a flash loan and actually, passing a vote in the Maker protocol with that. And so that was very alarming. And obviously, the amount of available liquidity in the space for flash loans is actively being monitored at this point. And so, yeah, this upgrade is a really, really big sigh of relief to MKR voters who were worried about that. And it was, a very real threat. But thankfully, that is now a threat of the past. And the news for this week to MKR voters is to migrate. So if you go on the voting portal, there should be instructions that pop up that prompt you to close your prior voting contract that's attached to the old governance contract and to migrate over to the new one. So feel free to do so if you would like to continue participating in governance. And yeah, this is kind of really exciting that this happened. All right, cool. And then and then right after the activation, there was an executive vote that was submitted on Friday, December 11th, and passed pretty much the next day. So it put up REN BTC and Uni as new collateral types. So be on the lookout for those vaults to come about. And then we actually are running a really cool experiment. So people have been talking about instant access modules for quite a while. And we have finally taken the step as a community to test it. So we are actually running a debt ceiling instant access module for the ETH-B vault type. And that actually explains this this really, really weird thing. So I didn't realize this was happening until embarrassingly late. And I saw this debt ceiling of just shy of 15 million. I was like, that's got to be a typo. But I realized then that it's actually the instant access module and kind of the logic behind it that set it to this weird number. So that's going to be hard to get used to, seeing not even numbers as debt ceilings. But with the instant access module, that seems to be the case. Additionally, the Maker community, the Maker voting community, the MKR voters, finally came to consensus and reduced stablecoin stability fees to 0%. So this has been kind of in the works for quite a while. I'm not going to get too deep into the backstory of this, but yeah. So stablecoin stability fees are set to 0%, and which is really good because actually maybe I'll show a little bit, but it's pretty good because as you can see from USDCA, we're coming up really close to breaking that. A lot of the positions are coming really close to breaking their required collateralization, and since liquidations are turned off, it's kind of impossible to liquidate these positions, so we have to just freeze them by not charging them a stability fee anymore. And so yeah, this is kind of ongoing. If I guess a little bit more context, for the majority of the year, DAI has been trading above peg, and Maker Governance has pretty much done everything in its power to help remedy the peg. And a part of that effort was to actually onboard a lot more collateral, including stablecoins and USDC, specifically from the USDC-A vault type. Took a huge share of outstanding DAI, almost 500 million DAI as a result of the stablecoin. And most of these positions did so in order to arb the peg down. And this worked successfully. The DAI peg is very close to $1. And generally speaking, I would say Maker really, really what's the word? I guess traversed this storm really well. And now this next phase is going to be about continuing to defend the peg, but also to deal with these positions and to help people unwind. And that's actually the idea behind the PSM being implemented as well. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of detail behind that. And feel free to ask questions. I'm happy to take your questions and kind of bring it back next week and dive a little bit deeper into kind of the story that was developing here. Yeah, YFI A also got adjusted. I think it was that. I'm not gonna think. I'm just gonna check because I have the internet. So let's see. I think it was that YFI A went. Yeah. So the stability fee was adjusted upward from. It used to be 4%, and now it is 10%. So significant increase in the stability fee because of the fact that there's a lot of risk behind YFI, and I think it was a recommendation from actually the risk team that we should increase that rate, and the community agreed. But actually, the rate setting proposal right now is going to push the YFI A stability fee down to 9% instead of 10%. So yeah, constant dynamic balancing act, these stability fees, and it's so cool to watch. And yeah, and then the last one is just Year in Finance getting whitelisted on the Oracle for YFI USD. We got about a minute left, and I'm happy to kind of skip over the MIPS update. Charles St. Louis posts a really, really great one in the forums. Just check that out if you want to do some reading during lunch. Yeah, all of these things are here for you to check out, so I'm not gonna cover it much more in this call. I'm just gonna get back on here and say thank you for tuning in. Happy Tuesday, and I hope you all have a productive week. And just as a quick announcement, there will not be a community call next Tuesday or the Tuesday after. So for the next 2 weeks, we are in shutdown. So no call on the 22nd and no call on the 29th. I will be seeing you, this group of people that watches this call, January 5th. And hopefully I will have an interesting guest or yeah, just a good call planned. And I'm looking forward to that. So happy holidays, everybody. And I hope you enjoy the festivities. Thank you all.